and welcome to the Taste of Techstars Sustainability. Hopefully everything's going through okay. Seems like it. Great. So this is a live webinar that we're going to do. We're going to do a series of about 8 of these content related, and then we're going to do a ninth, which is an Ask Me Anything about our program. So this is a way for us to give you a chance to get a feel for what our program is like, as well as help you move your business forward. So what I'd like to do is hand it over to Hannah to introduce herself. She's part of the program team here to give us a little bit of an overview of the program and Techstars.
Awesome. Thanks, Zach, and welcome everyone. We're so glad that you're here with us this morning, afternoon, depending on where you are. Feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat if you want to say hi to the other attendees. I'm Hannah Davis. I'm the program director for the program. And real quick, if you're not familiar with Techstars, we're the worldwide network that helps entrepreneurs succeed. We do this many different ways through accelerator programs, startup weekends, startup weeks. And we do this because we believe entrepreneurs can really change the world. And so this accelerator program that we run is one of 48 programs around the world. And we partner with the Nature Conservancy, who I will introduce you to now, which is August Ritter.
Hey all, August Ritter here. Thanks. I just want to echo Zach and Hannah's excitement to have everybody on the line today. Really excited to connect. So I'm the program director from the Nature Conservancy side, kind of the third leg of the tripod, if you will, kind of sitting at the nexus between the Nature Conservancy, Techstars, and the companies we've got in the program. So really excited to be here and getting to know all of you. Thanks, Hannah. You want me to give a quick overview, Hannah, of TNC?
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Okay, sweet. So assuming some of you probably know who TNC is, many of you might not, which is totally okay. So TNC is one of the largest conservation organizations in the world. We are dedicated to conserving the lands and waters on which all life depends. So we're guided by science, and really we create innovative on-the-ground solutions to our world's food, water, and climate challenges. We work in 79 countries, so we've got a pretty big global footprint. And we use a collaborative approach that engages kind of anyone from local communities to governments, the private sector, to build kind of that sustainable future that our science says is possible. Just a real quick kind of like why. We launched this partnership with Techstars and this accelerator because we saw a critical gap. We needed a more systematic way to really identify the world's best entrepreneurs who are building disruptive, commercially viable technologies that are solving the same problems that we at TNC care about. And so really excited to this is the third year of the program and looking forward to kind of giving you a taste of the kind of expertise as well as some hopefully more information on kind of the network that TNC and Techstars have to offer to help companies scale up their. So that's who TNC is, and then happy to answer questions at the end of the call about TNC and our role in the accelerator. Thanks, Hannah. Thanks, Zach.
Thanks, August. And real quick, just about the accelerator, this session, again, is not about that. It's just to provide value to your business and help you move along. But if you are interested, it's a 13-week in-resident program in Denver, Colorado, where we office with the Nature Conservancy. And we bring in 10 companies kind of focused in providing sustainable food and water, protecting land and waters, fighting climate change, and greening cities. And we help them grow their business rapidly. So if you have more questions about that, let us know. And again, this is just to give a taste of our program and hopefully help you with your business and being successful in the great things you're doing in the world. One thing I did just notice that the event chat is disabled. So if you have questions, put it in the Q&A chat. And I'm going to try to fix that. But thanks so far. Anyone who's chatted, those has, I think, gone directly to me instead of the group. But I will work on that now. This is our first session, so we'll probably have a couple of bugs to work through, and we'd love your feedback as we do these sessions as well. So with that, I'll kick it over to Zach, and let us know if you have questions.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Hannah and August, for giving a great overview there of Techstars and TNC. It's really a great partnership, and I'm thrilled to be part of it. The place I want to start today is the session's about elevator pitch. And I want to give a little bit of context around where the elevator pitch fits in with other types of ways that you might be describing your business, so that you can get a little bit of a feel for where this all fits in. So most entrepreneurs are pretty familiar with what I'd call the customer pitch. So this is talking about your product to a customer. You get pretty good at that over time because selling is such a key part of company building. It's not what we're going to talk about today, but it's the thing that's typically the most familiar. Other ways that you can describe and talk about your business tend to fall in a couple of other areas. So with customers, you've got kind of the initial overview. Maybe you've got a deep dive presentation that you do. And then if you're doing B2B sales, often there are tactics that you can use to compete against a competitor, win the deal, kind of the final closing aspects. It's important to get good at all of that. Often the elevator pitch can think of it's a little bit more closer to an investor pitch. And part of that's true because one of the key differentiations of an elevator pitch is you're giving an overview of the business to somebody that may not really know much of anything about the details behind the business. So if we think about investor type presentations that you could do or pitches that you can do, probably the most famous for accelerator programs is the demo day pitch. This is where you get up in front of an audience, give a 4 to 5 minute, very rehearsed, refined story about the business. Again, we're not going to talk about that here today, but I want to give you a little bit of context for where this fits in. When you're raising money and you get past the demo day pitch, often there's an investor meeting. So that tends to be kind of a one-on-one with an associate or a partner. And that tends to be a longer presentation, certainly more than the 5 minutes. That's a detailed overview of the company. And then kind of the ultimate version of that is the partner pitch where you're spending 30, 40, 50 minutes describing the business to a whole group of investors. We're going to zoom in today and talk about the elevator pitch. This is a short overview, unlike the investor pitch, the demo day pitch, which is much longer. This is a short way, a succinct way for you to explain what the business is. Like most things in life, the more succinct you make it, often the harder it is to construct. So I really encourage you to work through the details of really honing in on your elevator pitch. The good thing is that there's a pretty common format to this. It's a format that is pretty recognized. I'm going to start out with that format. So the thing to be aware of here is if you follow this to a T, it can feel a bit formulaic. So what I encourage you to do is follow the formula. It makes it easier. Then refine it over time and practice. So that begs the question, what is the formula? What's the kind of place, the structure to start with on an elevator pitch? And the most common one is for customer who has problem, we provide solution. Very simple construction. You can get a little bit fancier with it and add in how you're unlike your competitors or more details about how you make money. And that can help you refine the message. So if I were to use as an example, so Hannah gave an overview of the Techstars program. August talked about TNC and the partnership there. So if we were to give an example of that for Techstars sustainability, what might our elevator pitch look like? So one way to think about that, or one way to try that on, is for founders who want to grow their business and their impact, the Techstars Sustainability Accelerator provides mentorship, capital, and a 13-week intensive experience that turns your odds as an entrepreneur of success from just 5% into 86%. Unlike other programs that bring in hundreds of companies, each year we only bring in 10 companies focused on tackling climate change, providing food and water sustainably, and building healthy cities. So notice that I followed the format there, tweaked it slightly to make it a little bit more refined. But in that, you can see who our customers are, entrepreneurs like you. The problem, which is entrepreneurship is brutally hard. The success rates are really low. And our solution is capital, mentorship, and the outcome for the entrepreneur, so what's in it for the customer, of turning the likelihood of success from 5% into 86%. Now, you're not trying to say everything in that elevator pitch. you actually want to invite questions. Pay a lot of attention to the questions that you get after you give your elevator pitch. It'll give you key feedback on how well you're doing on your pitch. So if you get a question back immediately, which is kind of a stare and like, what do you do again? Not a good sign. Time to refine. The typical trap that you'll fall into when you start with your elevator pitch is you really get focused in on the solution, or you think about the category or the name of what you're doing. So notice in there, in the Techstars sustainability elevator pitch, it would be really easy to lead with, we are a 13-week accelerator. Now, if you didn't know what an accelerator is, that may be kind of unmooring. 13 weeks, well, what's special about 13 weeks? Notice how a lot of what I talked about was the benefit. It's critical to shift your orientation in an elevator pitch away from viewing the world as you see it about your company to how your customer would view that. And that can be a little bit challenging at first, especially if you're early days and you don't exactly know who your customer is going to be yet, or you're kind of struggling to find what the value proposition is. But again, it's a good way to test it. So the nice thing about an elevator pitch is you'll give it a lot. It's something you get a lot of practice with. It's important to get good at it. And every time you have the opportunity to learn about how people are reacting to your business and how do you communicate it in a way that makes sense. So let's take a little bit deeper into if you're just getting started and working on this elevator pitch. Again, because the shift is so much toward your customer and your customer's viewpoint, it can be a little bit of a challenge. How do you get a little bit closer to that perspective? One of the critical things that I find valuable is when you're doing early customer development, interviews or customer discovery work, it can be really, really powerful to, at the end of your customer development session where you're interviewing a potential customer to get to know their worldview and understand kind of how they see the world, is ask them to repeat back to you what they think you're doing in their words. So basically get them to give you your elevator pitch for you. And the nice thing about that is it'll free you from seeing your business only through your eyes. You'll understand through the efforts of your prospects and the person you're doing the interviews with, where did they struggle? Where did they not get it sort of crisp and in an understanding? And the key thing there is they might not hit the formula just right, or they may not get the structure of an elevator pitch right. Key thing is listen to how they describe what you're up to. Listen to their words, how they frame it. Encourage them to describe the business from their point of view or their benefits. And what that'll enable you to do is hear their language about them rather than about you. It's the biggest trap that I see people get in with elevator pitches is it's just so easy to describe what you do. It's really important to describe how you add value to your customers. Okay. In preparation for this, I asked a few of you that signed up if you'd be willing to workshop a little bit of your elevator pitch with me. So I wanted to give a couple of examples kind of before and after. And I haven't committed to these to memory like you would with an elevator pitch. So I'm going to be reading off kind of the before and the after here. So Carbon Undone was one of the companies that graciously allowed me to workshop their elevator pitch. And again, what I want you to do is I'm reading these out as I'll give you the before that they gave me word for word. And then I've got an example potential reframe of the elevator pitch. And let's have your ears kind of listening for the structure. How did the structure change? And more importantly, how did the point of view change? So the first example we have, Carbon Undone, is a chief sustainability officer in an app for small businesses. We help small businesses measure their carbon footprint, set a science-based or budget-based reduction target, and implement the most cost-effective strategies to meet their goals. We then help business owners market their climate leadership to customers. It's a good overview. Here's a potential reframe, again, shifting a little bit more toward the customer's point of view and helping the listener orient very quickly into who is this for and how do you add value to that person. So here's a potential reframe of that elevator pitch. For small businesses who want to reduce their carbon emissions and waste, but it can't afford to hire a chief sustainability officer, we provide a software solution that measures their current emissions, suggests strategies to achieve emissions reductions targets, and help market their climate leadership. Unlike one-size-fits-all solutions, we tailor our suggestions to the specifics of the business. So a little bit of a rewrite there. Notice the shift. So first off, a reorientation to who's it for. I find that when I listen to elevator pitches, and I get the privilege of listening to a lot of them throughout the year, is the first thing I'm trying to orient to is who's your customer. I find for me, it's really hard to understand a business, again, because we're not just talking about the product here, we're talking about the business, what the business is about, unless I can pick it up and view it through the lens of the customer. So the first part here, the first remodel was shifting it from Carbon Undone is a chief sustainability officer. That's recognizable. I get that. I understand that. The challenge is that I'm not immediately kind of clued into the problem that the business has. What would motivate the company to seek out a solution like yours? So instead of Carbon Undone as a chief sustainability officer app for small businesses, I don't really understand what the underlying problem there is. For small businesses who want to reduce their carbon emissions and waste. So leading up to customers, what's motivating them, but can't afford to hire a chief sustainability officer. So that's reinforcing the problem. We provide a software solution. So I get it. Okay, it's software that measures their current emissions, suggests strategies to achieve emissions reductions, and helps market their climate leadership. Sometimes it can be powerful to give 2 or 3 points of value, especially early on, because maybe you don't yet know what the central point of value is. So you get to suggest a couple of them. And then again, listen for the questions that come back. Let's cover another one here. So another attendee for today offered up their elevator pitch, and let's look at potential reframe on it. Okay, we monetize real-time carbon data by connecting low carbon companies and impact investors through our carbon monitoring and validating platform. Current impact investors have difficulty quantifying real financial returns and projections for corporate environmental activities due to no validating system of carbon emissions. We provide direct access to the real-time carbon emissions to the companies of carbon portfolios through our IoT CO2 sensors connected to our tamper-proof private ledger system. The system provides cheaper, faster, and more accurate carbon data incorporated into the investment valuation and projection on demand. So that's their elevator pitch. One thing I want to point out here is with an elevator pitch, and it's called an elevator because the idea here is that you can convey what your business is about in, let's say, the time it would take 4 or 5 elevators in a building. Somebody asks you, what do you do? And between the time you get on and 4 or 5 floors later and you get off, you've given them a succinct sense of what your business does. So in here, there are parts of what the business does. The trick is it's a little bit hard to, a little bit long to get to that point. So here's a potential remodel of this elevator pitch for this company. For impact investors who struggle to quantify the financial returns of investing in environmentally responsible companies, we provide a software platform to quickly and accurately predict investment returns based on real-time carbon emission data. Unlike existing systems that are prone to falsification, our tamper-proof private ledger and proprietary CO2 sensors ensure transparency and authenticity. So let's dive into a little bit of that and look at how that remodel came to be. Shifting, again, the beginning. Who's the customer? Being really crisp about who the customer is. So in this case, impact investors. Great. Immediately I hear that, okay, I can picture in my mind who the customers are. Now, once I have a picture in my mind as I'm evaluating this business and trying to understand it, I know the customer, I can target in on that. And I can frame the rest of what I'm about to hear through the lens of my expectation of, as a impact investor, going to be viewing this particular business. Next, we talk about here, what issues do they have? Impact investors, they struggle to quantify the financial returns in investing in environmentally responsible companies. So I already know these are impact investors. They're investing in environmentally responsible companies, and they struggle to quantify their financial returns. That makes sense because now I'm imagining in my mind, oh yeah, impact investors, they've got to report to limited partners and others who they're investing the money through the fund. Yeah, they're on the hook. I can see the urgency. I can see what's at stake. And again, it's a very tight phrase. So in those 12, 15 words, I build a lot of empathy for that investor. I know what they're struggling with, and I've got a good setup now to evaluate the rest of the business. We provide a software platform. Okay, I know there's software here. It's a platform that allows to quickly and accurately predict investment returns. So again, now I'm reoriented. Okay, the solution is oriented toward value around investment returns. And then in this case, the unlike was a way to bring in more information about the difficulties that the customer has. So notice in there, in the remodel, I went from doing a really deep dive into the customer problems at the very beginning. So it's kind of a generic, but yet specific enough to understand overview of the pains and the challenges of the customer. And then in the unlike, really dig in and get a sense for the urgency and the issues of the customer. Unlike existing systems that are prone to falsification, so we know that falsification is also a big issue for our customers. And then the solution, details of the solution come into the unlike as well, which is now I know there's a private ledger. So I'm thinking, well, maybe that's a blockchain. Maybe that's something else. I don't exactly know, which is fine. I'll cover that in a second. And proprietary CO2 sensors. And then a last little punch at the end to ensure transparency and authenticity. Again, reinforcing those couple of points. And on all of this, it's not that I have to get it perfectly right or get the full detail. Because to give a full, if you think about a demo day pitch, excruciating care goes into those. It's a really detailed story. It takes 4 minutes, 5 minutes to tell. So you're not going to be able to fit in 4 minutes worth of content into an elevator pitch. That's completely fine. Because what you're trying to do is invite questions. So like for this elevator pitch, I would guess a likely question from this one would be private ledger. Can you say more about that? What's the technology behind that? Oh, interesting. You chose to make a proprietary CO2 sensor. Why was that? And you may be able to also sense excitement or skepticism in the person you're describing. Again, getting more quick data back from the people that you're giving the elevator pitch to. The reason we focus on this a lot at the beginning, especially of our accelerator programs, but I also like to work on this with any of the companies that I work, mentor with or advise, is it's really important to get this succinct. So in the context of our accelerator program, the first about month, 3 weeks that Hannah and August described is really focused around building a mentorship team and subject matter experts and scientists from TNC around the entrepreneurs that we bring into our program. So what that means is that 70, 80, 90 meetings of explaining to mentors what you do, what's the business. And so it's critical to get really good at framing what your business is as fast as possible. Outside of the accelerator context, again, this is really important as well, because it's your opportunity in a minute or two to get an advocate on your side, to get somebody who understands what you're doing, is excited about it, and is anxious to lean in and help out. So I want to stop here and maybe giving a little bit of stories, Hannah or August, about how you see elevator pitches showing up in the accelerator, and maybe some stories that you have.
You've done a great job at kind of outlining the importance of it. I will say, especially as we're kind of seeing so many companies, it's really important to have it down and ready. And especially, I'll run into the CTO of some event at somewhere. So it's not just the CEO, it's not just the founders. It's not even just the leadership team. Like I said, Techstars is a worldwide network that helps entrepreneurs succeed. Every single person at Techstars knows that sentence. And so as your teams grow to making sure that there's alignment of your whole team on everything. Okay, great. We're also getting a couple of questions. So
I'll just quickly add. I mean, one of the things I think, in my mind, that's some elevator pitches apart from others, is a real deliberateness, if you will, around highlighting the problem. I find a lot of times, particularly in this space, people talk a lot about the solution that they're offering, but really trying to figure out a concise way to talk about the specific pain point that customers are feeling that you're solving. I think is of critical importance that I don't want to say oftentimes, but sometimes gets overlooked.
I did notice one question in the Q&A around customer discovery and kind of getting a pool of people to talk to. It's a critical issue to pay attention to at the very beginning of customer development. I mean, when you're starting out, this is typical for almost everybody, which is we're trying something new. We don't know exactly who the customers are going to be. How do we find them? How do we get people to talk to? We'll be doing another Taste of Techstars session here, Taste of Techstars Sustainability, around customer development. But again, this is really important for elevator pitches as well. So if you think about in customer discovery, the first place that you're going to be paying attention to is thinking about, okay, where are customers or potential customers likely hanging out? How can we get in front of them? So this may be trying to attract them through social media. It may be trying to find early adopters that you already have some experience with because you've interacted with them or you have a prior relationship with them. So again, reach out to people and try to find people adjacent to the problem that you think you're going to solve. When you reach out to them, this is another place where the elevator pitch can come in, which is you want to give a sense of where the business is going, what you're trying to learn more about, without giving away all of the details. So it's actually critical when you do customer development is don't lead with the solution. Just like in an elevator pitch, it's important not to lead with the solution, but lead with the customer and the pain point. What's the pain that's going to motivate change and adoption? So when you think about finding these initial customer development interviews, try to resonate, get them to connect with the pain that they're potentially feeling. Because if that pain's bad enough, they're likely to look for a solution. And the first step of looking for a solution is, yeah, sure, I'll talk to them. I'll learn more about the project that they're up to, and maybe they'll do something that can help make my pain go away. Especially when you get started, it's common to think about, okay, what's our business going to be? What's the label we put on what we're building? And you lead with that. Chances are good in the beginning, you'll get that label wrong. And the label really only makes sense maybe even years later after you've released the product and now a category is starting to emerge, or in the product market fit, a label around this activity is starting to emerge. So what I encourage you to do is lead with the pain and lead a little bit with an identification of, if you're reaching out an email, let's say, acknowledge that you think that the person you're emailing is likely to have this pain given their background or something that you know about them. Get their metaphorical head nodding like, oh yeah, I feel that pain. I understand that. That's how you make the connection with that person, not with a label about what you're building or how you're building it. So I encourage you to in those emails and those outreach, if you're using social media, if you're trying to find groups of people that are hanging out around a common issue, tap into the pain that they're experiencing and use that to begin with. If you don't get any replies back, then you've got some evidence that, okay, the pain that we think they're having or how we're describing that pain isn't yet resonating. And that allows you to tweak the statement of pain or the statement of urgency on their side. Run another experiment, see if you can get anybody to respond back to you for doing 20 to 30 minute customer development interviews. Another thing I encourage is don't lead with like a gift certificate or something like, hey, we're basically going to pay you to come in. If you want to do that after the fact, that's fine. But you want evidence that what you're describing from a pain standpoint resonates, not that you're tempting somebody with a gift card to get them in. You'll get much better evidence that way. Once you have those details in customer development, then again, you can start to shape that into what's your elevator pitch on the business. Keeping in mind the customer discovery is initially about the customer. The elevator pitch, while the customer is central to it, there's also the business dynamic around it. So hopefully that answers the question about customer outreach when you're doing customer development. Let's see if there are other questions that are showing up. Okay, there's another question here about altering your elevator pitch when presenting your business to potential business development partners. When I think about business development, so in this case, what I'm assuming is that this is maybe a channel opportunity for somebody to sell through your product, or there's an opportunity for this other company to maybe bundle your product. The critical thing to me in those negotiations or those early conversations is common customer. It's very easy for business development to be about the business dynamics, to be about the dollars and cents of it. The reason I don't like starting there for startups is by very nature, you're going to be talking to people who have more traction or power in the market. If you're a startup, often you're going to be thinking about business development opportunities with larger companies. They will have the position of strength in the negotiation, and in most of the interaction, they're going to have that position of strength. The key way that I've found to reframe that position of strength is to turn the conversation toward the customer. Because it's unlikely that the company that's bigger than you is going to exert undue pressure or leverage if the conversation that you're framing is around mutual benefit to your customers. Again, coming back to the elevator pitch, the first part of the elevator pitch is who has the pain. So that helps you orient around the customer. You'll get data quickly back on business development opportunities when you give the elevator pitch. By leading with the customer, you'll immediately get data back about, does that partner care about that customer? Did you get sort of their bullseye? Are there strategic drives inside of that bigger company that they're focused on that customer? If they sort of glaze over and go, we don't, customer's not really for us right now, that's great data. You get that back immediately. Because if you lead with a label, or if you lead with the kind of what you're building, it can be really easy for that whole conversation to go down into kind of the trap of only talking about the product. And you go down that side, unless you have a technology that's world revolutionary that everybody wants, you're going to move that conversation into an area that isn't necessarily your position of strength. The other thing about business development conversations is it's very easy to come into that thinking about, from your standpoint, what's in it for you. And as a small startup, usually there's a lot potentially in it for you. But for that larger company, they're going to ask themselves that same question: what's in it for us? And if you can reframe it away from yourself or your technology and move the conversation into what's in it for your mutual customers, it makes the conversation so much easier and simpler. So that's why an elevator pitch is largely unchanged when you're doing business development opportunities. You may tweak one thing if you choose to add on the unlike component of your elevator pitch. It may be that your unlike is striking a contrast to this company that you're trying to do a business development deal with. So you may want to be mindful of the fact that you don't want to reframe so strongly against what they're doing and how they're doing it to pose questions or notions of threat or misunderstandings. Keep it on your customer. Get mutual agreement on, yep, this is the customer, this is the pain we both see that customer experiencing, and together, our solutions together can have a disproportionate impact on these customers. So that's how I would encourage you to move or slightly alter the elevator pitch when you're doing business development conversations. And then a question here about if you have multiple products or if your products have multiple value propositions. Should your elevator include both pitch and should you focus on one? Remember, in an elevator pitch, because you're trying to be as succinct as possible. So the goal here is convey the most information with the fewest words. What I encourage you to do is pick a product and talk about it. But again, the key thing is that if you frame it from your customer standpoint, often what I see is if you have multiple products, see if there's a common pain point underneath both of those products. If they're aimed at the same customer, if you can discover a mutual or a common underlying pain that both of your products are solving, then the full front part of the elevator pitch, it actually doesn't matter if you're talking about one product or two. Then when you're talking about the solution part, so the third component of the elevator pitch, which is the description of your solution, if getting into there, you need to differentiate between the two products. If you're an early startup, to me, that's one warning sign, which is, are you spreading yourself too thin? If your two products are addressing two different customers, multiple pain points, to me, that's a warning sign that you're taking on too much too soon. Double down, figure out which one conveys how you're helping the customer the best. The other thing too is that often you don't want to talk down at the feature level, because you're trying to convey an understanding of the business through the lens of your customers. So what I would encourage you to do is pick the most prominent one, most prominent pain point, most prominent solution that you offer to that pain point, and don't get too hung up on the product just yet, because again, you're talking at a high enough level that you're not really zooming in at the product level yet. Questions are a great way to then start to bring in more of the product suite or product offering. So if somebody asks you, well, how exactly do you accomplish that? We do it with two different solutions, two different products. One product's focused on this part of the customer, the other product's focused on this part of the pain point. And that'll help you add clarity without the initial distraction of getting too lost into the weeds of how many products do we have. Another thing, once you get good at the elevator pitch, is starting to adapt the elevator pitch to your audience. When you first get started, it's going to be really hard to call an audible and think about, I've got 6 different elevator pitches. I can use each one depending on exactly who I'm talking to. But over time, work on maybe 2 or 3. So if you're talking to somebody with industry expertise, you may be able to use an elevator pitch that leverages more of that mutual understanding of your market that you're operating in. If you're talking to an investor, you may want to focus a little bit more on the value creation side of the business and the value that the customers receive from your product. If you're talking to an employee or a potential employee, that somebody you're trying to hire, you may have a version of the elevator pitch that gets them excited about the work. Again, still coming at it from giving them an understanding who the customer is, the problem that customer has, but adding maybe a few words about the fun and the joy of making these customers' lives better. Again, start with one, but over time, when you get comfortable with that one, add a second one that's specific to a particular audience. And then if that's working well for you, potentially add a third one. But again, keep it simple. Get it to the point where when you give the elevator pitch, you get a quick reaction back from the person you're describing to, like, oh, I get what you do. If somebody asks you the question, they kind of recoil, or they say, I don't really get it. How do you, what are you doing? How are you doing it? Who's this for? That's a great sign that go back to this structure and begin retooling your elevator pitch. All right, let's see if we have other questions here. So there's another question here about phrase it if you have multiple customers. Would you create an elevator pitch specific to a customer? So again, this is a variant of multiple products, but now if you're going after multiple customer segments. The first thing, again, that I would reflect on is if you're going after, as an early company, as a startup, multiple different customer segments, you may be taking on too much. It's really important to find that kind of first initial customer segment that really is passionate about what you're doing or has an acute problem that is really kind of in your zone of expertise and your ability to solve it. So if you do happen to have 2 customers, and one area where this often comes up, there's no way to avoid it, is if you're building a marketplace business. If you're building a marketplace business, there's a supply component to the business and there's a demand component to the business. Often they have different pain motivators, and often there'll be different customer segments. So if you think of eBay, you've got buyers and sellers. You may have platforms where you have farmers producing, storing carbon, and then businesses who want to buy that carbon removal. So again, those are two very different customer segments. The reality, if you're running a marketplace, the thing I like to describe it as is congratulations, you're running three different businesses. You're running a supply business, a demand business, and then an equilibrium business. The equilibrium business is making sure the supply and demand is in order. Typically what you'll find is that with a marketplace, when you're constructing your elevator pitch, is there will be one side of the marketplace that's easier for people to understand. It may not be the primary side of your marketplace, but conceptually it's just easier to explain. So what I encourage you to do is talk about the customer and the problems that they're facing on the side of your marketplace that's easier for the person that you're talking to understand. Typically that will be, some marketplaces will have a business on one side, a consumer on the other side. Understand who you're talking to, take a guess as to which side they'll understand a little bit better, and then lead with that. Typically what this means then is for a marketplace type business, you're going to have potentially two elevator pitches that you're comfortable giving, with one side, either the demand side or the supply side leading it, and then another with the opposite side leading it. And then experiment. The cool thing about the elevator pitch is you'll be giving it a lot. You'll get a lot of opportunities to practice. So come up with your best guess, following the formula, add in, let's say start with the supply side as an example, then add in details about the demand side. But again, the key point here, and this comes up in demo day pitches and storytelling in general, is with marketplace businesses, it can feel like you have two primary customers or two primary storytellers or points of view to your pitch or to your elevator pitch. The key thing is to tell the other character's condition through the eyes of your primary character. So if you were describing an elevator pitch around eBay, let's say that you anchor in on buyers, because probably more people are familiar with the buying process. Then you would, if you add in parts about the seller, you would do that through the eyes of the buyer. And that keeps it, it's a simple trick that allows you to keep the story a little bit simpler because it's only being told through one perspective. It's often hard for people, especially in something as short as an elevator pitch, to switch perspectives and try to, 10 words in, I get the viewpoint of this character, and then you switch on them. The next 10 words are from the viewpoint of the other character. It's kind of jarring to the listener. So that's a little trick if you're doing marketplace businesses. But if you're not doing a marketplace business and you're going after very different customer segments, I would invite you to think about what's the one we really need to double down on first. There are times where the customer segment can, from the outside, appear different, but when you zoom in, there's a common underlying problem to both. And that's the advantage of framing the elevator pitch from the point of view where the problem is really the primary point you're trying to make. Because if there's a common problem, it doesn't matter as much what the customer segment is. And you can zoom that language out a little bit and get just specific enough so that I can get a sense of where you're going, but not so specific that it invites for businesses we do this, for NGOs we do this. I encourage you to play with that as you work on your elevator pitch. Okay, next question is around advice on style and or choice of words for the pitch. Especially a comment here is around techies. Yeah, this is often a very common pattern that I see with elevator pitches, especially if you have a technical background, because we tend to really get enamored with the solution. The underlying technology is really cool. We can't wait to tell you about all the really cool, crazy stuff we're doing underneath the hood that makes this thing happen. What I encourage you to do is, again, look at the customer segment. What problem do they have? Anchor on that, and that will really help you take away some of the underlying technological words. It's also important to understand your audience. So let's say that you're at some conference that's full of technologists that are familiar with the technology that you're building. There, it may be okay to dive a little bit deeper into the underlying technology and the language of that community as you're giving your elevator pitch. Again, I encourage you to start up high, at a high enough level and remove the jargon out of what you're describing. One way to think about this is, give your elevator pitch to your neighbor, a family member who's not really all that familiar with what you're doing, somebody who's not living in the world that you're living in. Give them that elevator pitch and see how, where they push back, what is still not quite clear to them. Sometimes this is referred to as the grandmother test with the elevator pitch, which is, go to your grandmother, give your elevator pitch, and see, kind of what reaction do you get back. We've done this in the past where we've had entrepreneurs give their elevator pitch and even a more kind of detailed pitch to 9, 10, 11-year-olds. It's a really fun way to do pitch practice, because what you see is that, that audience is not familiar with the jargon. It's not familiar with the details that are potentially the bread and butter of which you think about every day. And it really gives you a good kind of dose of reality about the words you're using and how they're resonating with the audience. Again, the key here is that start out with a refined boilerplate one. As you notice, I was reading it off of a sheet of paper because I wanted to get it exactly right. So write it down. I find that elevator pitches are really a good thing to literally write word for word, practice it. When it starts working, then obviously you're going to memorize it and make it your own. After you've said it the 400th time, it'll feel right. But get those every word right. Look for jargon. Ask yourself, is there a way that we can change this to how I would describe it, to how our customers would describe this? I often find that taking the viewpoint of your customers is a really, really powerful filter to potentially remove jargon out of your elevator pitch. Okay, let's see if there are any other questions. I don't see any other questions here. So we'll start to kind of wrap up here around the elevator pitch. Again, the format that I really encourage you to think about and start from is 4, description of your customer segment, who have or has problem, which is a description of the problem from their language and their point of view. We provide solution. Sometimes you can replace the we with the name of your company. Get good at that. Get that comfortable, really resonating with people. Then you can add in unlike. So talk about unlike the alternative, we offer this unique value. And then sometimes, especially if your business model has some nuance to it, you can also add on to it, we make money by, and then describe the financial interaction that you have with your customer. So if you're being innovative on the business model side, it can be really powerful to add in the how you make money component. All right. That's the overview of elevator pitch. Hannah, August, invite you back into the conversation. What else would you like to add?
Just thanks everyone for showing up. Really hope this was valuable. Again, it was our first of 9, so we'd love your feedback. We'll send up a follow-up email that you can reply to if you have any suggestions for next time.
Yeah, we'd love to iterate and continue to make these as valuable as possible for you guys. So thanks again for all the work you do.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. See you next week.
Exactly.
Thanks.
See ya.